Welcome to Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a truly fascinating area that, well, it touches nearly every aspect of our modern lives, this human tendency to constantly seek more. It's a deeply ingrained belief, isn't it, that having more options, maybe more achievements or more stuff will automatically lead to, greater satisfaction. But what if, in many cases, the exact opposite is true?
It's such a common assumption, and it feels very intuitive, right? We're sort of conditioned to believe freedom equals infinite choice, and that equals ultimate happiness. Yet, as we'll explore today, real-world experience and quite a bit of psychological thinking often paint a surprisingly different picture. We're going to unpack why an abundance of choices or that relentless pursuit of the next big thing can paradoxically lead to anxiety, decision paralysis, and even a really profound sense of dissatisfaction. Our mission today is to understand the core reasons behind this paradox and, maybe more importantly, what practical things we can do about it in our own lives.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. So let's unpack this first concept that really gets to the heart of it. We're going to dive into what's known as the paradox of choice, a powerful idea popularized by the American psychologist Barry Schwartz. The traditional thinking, like you said, suggests more freedom, more options. We become happier, more fulfilled. It sounds logical.
It does.
But the reality, as our analysis shows, often stands in, well, stark contradiction.
Yeah, and what's truly intriguing here is how often this abundance just backfires. Instead of fostering happiness and, empowering us, an overwhelming number of options can lead to something called choice overload. And this isn't just a minor thing, it's a significant psychological hurdle. It shows up as paralysis when you're trying to make a decision, a real surge in anxiety, and surprisingly, a feeling of being almost enslaved by the very options that were meant to set us free.
Wow, that's quite the twist. We think more is better, but it leads to paralysis. How does that actually happen? In our heads, I mean. Why do we get stuck like that?
Well, we try to connect this to the deeper psychological stuff going on. The act of choosing, it implicitly involves renouncing all the other possibilities. Just think about it for a second. When you pick one path, one job, one partner, whatever it is, you're consciously or maybe unconsciously letting go of every other potential journey. And for many of us, there's this kind of underlying sense of lack, right? A constant search for something to complete us. So when you're faced with countless alternatives, it becomes incredibly easy to romanticize what you didn't choose. To imagine it might have been the perfect missing piece. This directly leads to what economists call a high opportunity cost, the real value of what you give up when you make a choice. With an almost infinite array of options, that perceived cost can feel astronomically high. It makes any single choice feel like this huge sacrifice.
Right. And I imagine that feeling of sacrifice is just amplified by something else we all do, probably without thinking, comparison. If you finally pick something, say, a new phone, or even something huge like a long-term relationship, and then you're constantly measuring it against all the other options you deliberately decided against, well, that sounds like a recipe for discontent. It's that classic grass is greener effect, only now, thanks to endless options, there's like a whole field of greener grass everywhere you look.
Exactly. This brings up a really, really important question. What happens to our expectations in this kind of environment? They just skyrocket. I mean, if we're giving up so much by selecting just one thing, then that one thing has to be perfect, doesn't it? It needs to justify this enormous opportunity cost we just talked about. And when it inevitably isn't perfect, because, let's be honest, nothing in life really is, we're left feeling deeply dissatisfied, maybe even regretful. And this applies across the board. Buying stuff, making huge life decisions about careers or partners. It's all affected. And think about the massive influence of social media here. It constantly bombards us with this endless stream of curated, often edited, perfect lives and products. It makes it exponentially harder to just commit or be genuinely content with what we've actually chosen. We end up becoming maximizers, always striving for the absolute best, instead of satisficers who are okay with just good enough.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I've definitely felt this myself. That feeling of scrolling through Netflix or whatever streaming service. You spend, longer trying to pick the movie than the movie itself. 20 minutes, maybe more, trying to choose. You finally settle on something, and then, half an hour in, you're sitting there thinking, man, I should have picked the other one.
It's a perfect, everyday example.
Right.
Really relatable. Now, contrast that with, say, being in a hotel room with only 5, maybe 10 TV channels, if you're lucky. Suddenly, that movie you've seen a dozen times, Gladiator or something, it feels kind of exciting to watch again. The limited options don't just make the decision easier, they often lead to a much higher enjoyment of whatever you do choose. This really suggests there's probably a magic number of options, sweet spot. And beyond that point, adding more choices actually starts to subtract from our well-being. And it feels pretty clear we've blown way past that sweet spot in many parts of modern life.
That whole discussion on the paradox of choice, it really highlights a core human thing, doesn't it? This almost insatiable impulse to constantly seek more, more money, more success, more love, more experiences, always believing that the next thing, the next achievement will finally bring that lasting satisfaction. But like we've seen, it so often doesn't.
Yeah, and this takes us beyond just the mechanics of choice into a deeper philosophical and psychological drive. There's a philosopher who once observed something like, desire is not the desire of a thing, but the desire to desire. Often what we truly crave isn't the object itself, but the process of seeking, the thrill of the chase, the journey of striving. Once we achieve something, once the goal is actually attained, that initial burst of excitement or happiness often fades pretty quickly. And then that familiar sense of, emptiness or void returns, prompting us to start chasing a new desire, a new more.
So it's almost like we're running on a kind of happiness treadmill, one that just never stops.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Psychologists actually have a term for this, hedonic adaptation. When something new and positive enters your life, a new car, a promotion, a big vacation, it gives you a significant but usually temporary boost in happiness. But humans are remarkably good at adapting. You quickly get used to the new circumstances, and your happiness levels tend to drift back towards their baseline. And this inherent mechanism then kind of fools us into believing we need something more, something else to feel good again. It just perpetuates the cycle.
Right, the treadmill keeps spinning and we keep running.
Exactly.
And in today's society, it feels like we're not just individually prone to this. We're actively taught that having more absolutely equals living better. It's almost a foundational message we absorb.
Oh, indeed. From a very young age, we're sort of socialized to see life as this endless ladder of achievements. Get good grades, then secure a good job, earn more money, buy a house, find a partner, raise kids, save for retirement. It's presented as this almost universal checklist for a good life. But what happens when you actually tick all those boxes? When you reach what you thought was the top, many people find themselves feeling, no different inside than they did before. Often wondering, okay, now what? Is there something else I'm missing? And so the chase just continues, often leading to profound exhaustion and sometimes a real sense of existential emptiness. It's like the goalposts keep moving.
And this cycle gets reinforced constantly, doesn't it? Especially, like you mentioned, by platforms like social media. We're perpetually bombarded with these highly curated, often heavily edited versions of other people's lives. The perfect vacations, the effortlessly happy relationships, the glamorous careers. It creates this powerful illusion that I should have that too. And if you don't, you're left with this persistent kind of gnawing feeling of inadequacy, or maybe even feeling like you're failing somehow.
Absolutely. And that's where that old saying, comparison is the thief of joy, becomes so incredibly relevant today. There will always be someone with more followers, a bigger house, a seemingly more perfect partner, a more exotic trip. It's endless. This constant external comparison creates this self-defeating cycle of perceived inadequacy. And beyond just social media, this ties into a deeper point. Many people try, consciously or not, to fill internal, maybe existential voids with external things. They seek meaning or belonging or self-worth through material possessions, professional success, even romantic relationships sometimes. But these external solutions, while they might provide fleeting satisfaction, they can't truly fill what are fundamentally inner voids. Those require something entirely different. Things like cultivating presence, discovering authentic meaning, finding a deep connection to yourself. External fixes just don't cut it long term.
Okay, so if this is such a pervasive issue, how do we draw the line? How do we distinguish between, say, healthy ambition and the seemingly endless, often self-defeating pursuit? Because chasing growth, wanting to improve ourselves, that isn't inherently bad, is it? We all want to evolve.
No, absolutely not. Healthy ambition is not just vital. It's arguably what drives human progress and personal development. It's crucial. The problem arises when your self-esteem, your whole sense of worth, hinges entirely on constant achievement. Or when you can never truly enjoy the present moment because you're always looking ahead to the next thing. Or when anxiety and burnout just take over because you literally can't stop the chase. It's like climbing this magnificent mountain but being so singularly focused on reaching the summit that you completely miss the breathtaking views along the way. You miss the invigorating fresh air, the camaraderie, the entire richness of the journey itself. If you're perpetually focused on what's missing, on what you don't yet have, you effectively blind yourself to the immense beauty and value of what you already possess right now. There's an old saying that puts it so well. He's not richest who have the most, but he who needs the least. It's about shifting your perspective on what enough means.
That's a really powerful distinction. Okay, so if we're caught between this paradox of choice pulling one way and the treadmill of endless pursuit pushing another, how do we actually begin to combat these deeply ingrained tendencies? How do we find a better way to live? How do we find that art of sufficiency you mentioned?
Well, a crucial starting point, based on what we've discussed, is to become far more intentional and informed in our decision-making. When you're faced with choices, whether it's a new gadget or a major life commitment like considering a potential partner, try to gather enough information to set realistic expectations. Not perfect, but realistic. Then, instead of just wallowing in endless options, consciously and proactively reduce your field of options. Do it through a process of elimination. If you're looking at 20 choices, challenge yourself. Narrow it down to a manageable 2 or 3 that genuinely meet your core needs or criteria. This helps shift from that maximizing impulse to satisficing choosing good enough instead of chasing the elusive perfect.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about that other piece? That tendency to romanticize the paths we didn't take, the choices we didn't make. That what-if thinking can be so corrosive.
Oh, absolutely. We really need to actively work on stopping that romanticizing of what never was. It's incredibly easy to imagine that the unchosen path would have been just unequivocally better, leading to some ideal outcome. But it's equally valid, and often much more realistic, to consider that maybe it could have been worse. Or maybe just different. Not necessarily superior in any meaningful way. Since you didn't actually experience it, you simply cannot definitively say it would have been better. The goal here isn't finding absolute perfection, it's finding good enough. Like we talk about, many genuinely good things get lost or devalued because we're relentlessly chasing some unrealistic, absolute ideal. And that formula we touched on is critical. Dissatisfaction equals expectations minus reality. If our expectations are perpetually sky high and totally detached from what's realistically possible, well, we're just setting ourselves up for a life of continuous dissatisfaction and disappointment.
So the core message really boils down to focusing on what is here right now, what you have chosen, rather than dwelling on what could have been or what you feel you don't have yet.
Precisely. And here's a kind of powerful twist that I think elevates the whole act of choosing. When you consciously and voluntarily embrace the renunciation that comes with making a choice. The choice itself gains this profound value. This is particularly poignant, I think, in personal relationships. When you choose one person, you aren't just choosing them, you're also actively, voluntarily renouncing all other romantic possibilities. And in that deliberate act of renunciation, a profound part of the value, the commitment, the depth of love in that relationship truly blossoms. It's about owning your choices fully, and in doing so, invest in them with much greater meaning.
Wow. That really reframes it. This all points to a profoundly different kind of ambition then. It's not about just endless accumulation, but about conscious, fulfilling engagement with life as it is.
Yes, absolutely. It's really about finding equilibrium. Our deep dive suggests cultivating what you call the art of sufficiency. What if, in those moments of doubt or that endless yearning for more, you just paused and told yourself, you know what? I am enough, just as I am right now. Or, what I have today, in this moment, is truly valuable. Or maybe I can still desire more, I can still strive and grow, absolutely, but I'm going to do so without denying the inherent beauty and worth of my present situation. It doesn't kill ambition or drive. Actually, I think it liberates it. It allows ambition to reclaim its rightful role as a powerful companion on your journey, rather than being the relentless, tyrannical master of your entire life. It really boils down to being truly grateful for what you possess and where you are, while still consciously and mindfully moving towards what you aspire to become or have. Finding that balance.
What an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive. Really digging into the paradox of wanting more and the surprising truth about choice and contentment. It really makes you rethink so much of how we navigate our daily lives and even our long-term goals, doesn't it? So the next time you find yourself endlessly scrolling through options, or maybe feeling that familiar pang of comparison after seeing someone else's apparently perfect life online, maybe just pause for a moment. Consider the true, often hidden cost of infinite options and that constant, often exhausting pursuit of perfection.
Indeed. Perhaps the most valuable thing isn't always having more, but learning to see what you already have right here, right now, with fresh eyes, and maybe with a deep sense of appreciation. That's definitely something truly worth mulling over.
Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to our next episode.